6 or 7 years now. Been keeping blood pythons for about 1 or 2 years maybe now, but I've learned a lot about them along the way. So I've got to do kind of like a little bit of a kind of an educational show for you tonight. So to start off, first thing about blood pythons, a lot of people don't understand. There's 3 different species of them. So not subspecies, not morphs, not localities, completely different species. The first one, usually the most noticeable one, when you pretty much think of when you say blood python, would be one like this. These are the ones that have all the red coloration. They got that, the brown head with the black tail. And, those are the most common ones you'll see, especially on like, online classifieds and stuff. And then as for the other 3, next, you got the Borneo short-tailed pythons. So that's one of the big things that confuses a lot of people. They'll call these Borneo blood pythons. They're not actually blood pythons. The only blood pythons are the red ones. These ones are the short-tailed pythons. And you can see these ones don't really get red at all. They usually kind of stick with a more of a brownish yellowish color around the back. They might get a little bit of like a honey coloring down the sides. This one's actually a marble, so it doesn't actually have any of that honey coloring. We also got these, the nice marbly looking sides. And really the only difference is, as far as care, there's really not any. They might get a little bit smaller than the blood pythons, but for the most part they're pretty much the same thing. Just different species. And aside from them, let's open this. Anybody want to take a guess as to what this is?
Python Curtis.
Python Curtis? Well, that's correct. Most people, this is another thing. A lot of times people will call them black blood pythons. That's another misnomer. They're actually called Sumatran short-tailed pythons. A lot of people don't know that because it's not usually something they'll use the name, and just saying the black part of the blood python just makes it a little bit easier to remember a lot of times. So a lot of people kind of picked up that name. They're actually called Sumatran short-tailed pythons though. But just to make it a little bit easier, I usually call them like black Sumatran pythons, black short-tailed pythons, something like that, just to bring up the black part so everyone knows what you're talking about. But anyways, yeah, that's another thing. So a lot of people used to get them into the pet trade along, when they first started getting them. They would make a lot of hybrids without even knowing it because everything was a blood python back there. They only recently got moved to species status back in 2000. And I'll pull these pictures up so you can see. This is a cross between a red blood and a Sumatran short-tailed python. As you can see, it basically just looks like a red blood python with a lot of black coloring, or maybe even just like a Sumatran short-tail with a lot of lighter coloring. So there's really no point in crossing them anyways. And a lot of people really frown against that anyways because it kind of gets out there, no one knows, they mislabel them, and it dirties up the bloodlines. So plus it's, it never quite gets quite what you expect. You're not going to get a red blood python with a black back. Just doesn't quite stay like that. But anyways, as far as care, a lot of people back in the day, back around when they first started coming to the pet trade, a lot of people thought they were just like ball pythons who needed a lot of humidity. They'd keep them at like 90 to 95 hot spot and 85-degree ambient with like 90 to 100% humidity just soaking all the time. That's actually, it works to some degree, but it's not a good idea. Actually, but in recent years, a lot of people have determined them to need much cooler temperatures. And I'm not talking like corn snakes or anything. They can't survive in 75-degree heat with no hot spot. But nothing above like 88 for a hot spot at most for an adult. And I keep mine at about 80 ambient. It's pretty good for them. And as for babies, so yeah, something about this size. I wouldn't say anything above this size. So anything about this size and under, I wouldn't even keep with a hot spot. Most breeders wouldn't either. Just keep them at about 80 to 82 ambient, maybe a little bit higher sometimes, depending on how they are. And they'll do just fine as babies like that. And then you want to bump up the hot spot as they get older. And now as for the substrate, it really works. A lot of people use like cypress and stuff like that. Maybe like sphagnum moss. That works. Personally, I like the paper. It's much easier to clean. It holds humidity enough. You don't really need a lot of humidity. That's another thing. A lot of people used to keep them with really high humidity. but really they don't need that much. They do, what I like to do as for keeping them humid, I don't keep them with an ambient, like all the time, 60 to 70. I just pretty much soak them down in the morning, get it nice and wet in there. Throughout the day it'll cool, it'll dry off and basically be dry. And that actually keeps them just fine. I mean, you just watch your snakes, you can tell, like on the scales, their scales will like get all, that little wrinkly feeling if they're not kept hot, warm, humidity enough. So, I mean, that's one of the things you can basically use to gauge their humidity. But, I mean, you don't want to keep them, really humid all the time because they do need higher humidity. But if you keep them too humid, they're liable to get an RI, they're liable to get scale rot. So you don't want to keep them all the time humid. You want to, raise it up in the morning, then let it cool out through the day. And as for the water bowls, they don't really need, something to soak in all the time. I like to keep my babies with something they can soak in. So something like this for anything, like that one, would be a great thing for them to soak in because they really enjoy soaking. And it's really good for the scales. You'll definitely notice a difference if you have one that soaks a lot because the scales just look smooth and just real well flattened out and, no wrinkles at all. As they get older, they don't really soak quite as much and it's, really hard to keep a really big, cat litter pan or cage. So around that time, you don't really need to do that. All they really need is, maybe a 9-inch dish, something that's, hard to flip, and just keep it fresh. Maybe clean it every 2 days. Just keep it fresh, and that's really what'll keep them the most, hydrated and everything, and that's the best for them. And basically, as far as keeping them, that's about how it goes. As far as the caging, you want to keep them in something smaller as a baby. So something like that, as far as his size, is about perfect. As a baby, I'd keep them in, 6-quart tubs like most people keep babies in. As an adult, they tend to like to stretch out. So you don't want to keep them in something too, confined or wide. A lot of people use the V175 tubs. They're the Christmas tree tubs. They're about 5 foot long by 2 foot by about 18. That's a really good size for them because they're able to stretch out their bodies and, hang around that heat tape. And that's, it's good for their digestion and everything. You can also keep them in like a 4-foot bow file. That will work pretty good too. And if you really want to splurge, you can keep them in like a 6-foot. That'd be even better. But it's that, and then the money comes into play. So depends on what you want to get for your snakes. And as far as the morphs go, I brought with a whole bunch of different pictures. I actually put this whole morph guide together a little while ago. It's not entirely perfect. I'm not sure it's going to pop up with the labeling for these. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of pictures right here, all kinds of different things. If you want to look at this, just let me know later. You can look through all these. We have a wider range of morphs these days. I actually just discovered this one, eyeball. So I know that's pretty much going to take the storm as far as blood python morphs go pretty soon. But right now, nobody even knows who has it, so that might be a little while. And that'll pretty much cover it. I mean, that's all you really need to know about a blood python. The rest you'll learn while owning them. As far as handling them, I wanted to go over how to handle a baby that's got a little bit of an attitude to them. Because a lot of babies tend to be feisty, and as they get older, they tend to tame down a little bit. So this guy, he's not too bad. I just got him on this Tuesday, last Tuesday I suppose. He's also in shed, so he's not having the best time right now. So if I were to stick my hand in there and give him a chance, he'd probably bite me. But really all you gotta do, you gotta remember, they don't have to be touched around their tail or their head, like any snake, but with them it's even more so. So what I do is I just give them something to aim at, kind of reach behind them, pick them up right in the midsection of the body. Okay. And you just pick them up. If you have a really mean one, they might try to strike around a little bit. For the most part, they'll tame down. They'll do this thing with their tail. I'm not doing it right now, but there he goes. Kind of inverts them and grabs around his tail, trying to musk on you and everything. That's kind of a defense mechanism they'll use as the younger ones. But really, you just gotta support them, let them do their thing. Don't act scared of them. Don't be like this. Otherwise, they're gonna know you're scared of them. They're gonna freak out, and that's a situation no one wants to be in. But you can see, haven't had him for more than a week now, and he's already pretty much tamed in my hands right now, even in shed. Any questions?
Doesn't look like it.
All right.
What have you got? A locale question.
Yeah.
You see people advertising for their Sumatran bloods. Now, but you got the Sumatrans that are the blacks, and so there is a locale for actual Sumatran bloods.
Right.
So it's actually two separates.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. There are localities within blood pythons. They're not like boas where you can see a Suriname as opposed to like an Argentine. Well, those are different subspecies, but say like a Suriname compared to a Colombian, you can definitely tell the difference. As far as blood pythons, they're not really easy to tell as far as localities. In the red bloods, there are Sumatran localities, Malaysian localities, and there's a little island of Bangka localities. A few other island localities, but they're kind of rare, in the pet trade at least. The Sumatrans are the most common ones to find, so if you ever have a question about what locality blood python you have, for the most part it's not really going to matter because they're all basically the same anyways. But most likely, almost 80% likely, you have a Sumatran. There's a few Malaysians floating around here and there. They're kind of hard to come by. There are some big breeders who like to breed the pure Bangka localities. I like those ones. Those are the ones that usually have the red heads to them, and they're kind of like more of a lighter pink tone with a little bit less specks in the size usually. But it's more of a line bred sort of thing. For the most part, they do look exactly the same though. As for the black ones, they have Sumatrans. They also have, actually they're just Sumatrans. There's also an island, I forget the name of it, but there is an island locality. It's not really much. It doesn't look quite as different as they come. I mean, it's a little bit smaller, and they are the smallest species, so it's going to be a little bit smaller anyways. As for different looks to them, they have chrome heads, black heads, and peach heads. The difference between that, the most common ones are blackhead. You'll mostly find those. Those ones, a lot of big breeders will selectively bred for the higher blacks. You get just like a nice smooth black snake all throughout. With the chrome heads, it's usually a little bit lighter down the sides, not really light, but it'll have a lot of contrast with that head, and they'll slowly just go to black. Then you got the peach heads. They're kind of separated from the Sumatrans by a little bit of a mountain range over here. And basically they've kind of evolved over the years to have that pink head. They have a lot of the side, a lot of the color along the side, not really black, just light color. And those are the ones that are hardest to tell apart from like Borneos because they have that pink head. Which is actually another thing I'd like to talk about. The way to tell them apart, it's not 100% accurate, so don't look at a snake and be like, oh, that's definitely this, because it may be a little bit accurate because some different breeders have proven it to not be accurate. Basically, the difference is, like you take a Borneo. If you look really closely, right below the eye, you can see they have that little big little labial scales. Those are the ones right at the lip. Then right above those, you got the little granular scales right below the eye. Those are called suboculars. And only the Borneos and the Sumatran short-tailed pythons have those. In blood pythons, they generally don't have it. Sometimes hybrids will. But that's the thing about hybrids, you can't even tell them apart like that. Sometimes they'll have them, sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll have like half, sometimes they'll have, it's just, you can't really tell about that. And then as far as telling the Borneos apart from the Sumatran short-tailed pythons, you can see right on the head, you can't see it right here, so I'd have to show you like, up close. But they got these pair of scales right behind your head. You'll be able to find it if you Google it, like, what do they call these? Supralabial scales, I believe they call them. Basically, on a Borneo, they'll come together at a line. So there'll be the two scales, they'll come together, and there'll be a line. With the Sumatran short-tailed pythons, they'll be like this, they come together at a point. So that's how you tell the difference between those two. But like I said, it's not 100% accurate, don't quote me on it, but on the blood pythons, they won't have the granular scales, and theirs will come together at a line. But, there's also, looking at their belly scales as far as counting them. That's not 100% accurate either. But I'll show you one thing that is kind of a good way to tell. It's this one. This is the Sumatran short-tailed python. You can see they got mostly a white belly with little black pieces to the pattern. If I go over, you can see this is a Borneo, pure white belly. Almost 100% of the time, I don't think I've ever seen a Borneo that didn't have pure white belly. Then on the blood pythons, you got pretty much a whole bunch of different speckling and black coloration throughout. I wouldn't say that's 100% accurate either because of morphs and stuff, but that is a nice way to tell. Let me bring that back up. But you can definitely tell looking at all three of them right next to each other. The load. There's definitely a look to each of them, so they're not that hard to tell apart once you learn them. So is there any more questions?
Which one's your favorite?
My favorite out of these?
Out of the
species.
Yeah.
They're red bloods. The Borneos are nice. I never, really got into them. I got this guy because I was buying them for a friend who needed extra money for his kid. And I always like the marble ones. They're my favorite as far as Borneos go. But just the colors overall, you'd see, especially looking at the rest of my collection. I got, the boas, and all my boas have like really high color. So I'm definitely going for all the red color. So I like the red color. Not that they aren't, not that they're ugly or anything. I still like the way they look. Just not quite my fancy. And the black ones, they're cool. The thing about those is, if I was going to get one, I'd get the most black one that I could possibly find, and they're expensive. So, much easier to find a really nice looking red one these days than it is to find a really nice looking black one, as far as I've found.
Hey Clayton, trouble feeders.
Trouble
They
feeders.
about the same as every other snake? Or?
With trouble feeders, the thing I find that's you can do, basically give them a smaller cage, give them more security, give them a hide, give them maybe some more substrate. That's the thing about him. He used to have a little bit of feeding problem. He doesn't like his paper because he likes to hide. He always wants to be under something. I gave him cypress, perfectly fine. Some of them just won't want to take it out of tongs. They don't do that sometimes. A lot of them will just rip it out of your hands. Some of them will just ignore it. You put it in their cage, they'll eat it at night. A lot of other snake species do that. Sometimes you just gotta go live a few times. Sometimes you gotta go fresh killed a couple times, get them started.
So your Borneo had problems?
Yeah, he had them, but it was just because he's been kept on cypress his whole life and he's used to it. And I put him on paper immediately, he didn't like it. Plus he's in a little bit bigger cage. This isn't the cage I normally keep him in. I keep him in a 67 quart. It's about maybe another foot longer than this one and a little bit wider. So you can see he's pretty, he likes this one. But then again, I don't have space in the rack for this one, so maybe 67 quart is getting bigger anyways. I guess while I'm at it, I might as well go over the reason I didn't bring with my other one, the red blood at least. He's my biggest male. He's about that big around and about 5 foot long, I think, and that's a good size for a smaller female or a good sized male. He's got this thing going on in his mouth because I think what it is a tooth kind of got broken off inside there, kind of caused a infection to start going. So it kind of swole up a little bit on his lip, on his gums actually. I did a lot of research about that, looked it up. Basically what you need to do, it's actually something you can do a lot of times, which I'll actually go over another time, I just remembered that. Basically I would take out all the substrate, replace it with nothing but water, just like a 1/8 thickness layer of water on the bottom, just a nice little layer. And just keep them in that, bump up the temperature a little bit. And every day you want to get a 0.05% solution of chlorhexidine. It's like a disinfectant you can buy for like skin.
Is that F10?
No. F10 is something else. Chlorhexidine is something you can buy at like Walgreens. It comes in a 0.2% solution. So you want to take it down a little bit, down to 0.05. So one per 8.
Yeah.
And then just take a Q-tip, rub it around in there, and just wipe down the jaw a little bit. You just do that twice a day, one in the morning, one at night, and it'll slowly just get better and better and better. And while I'm at it, while I was talking about the whole replacing it with the water thing, actually when they go in a shed, that's another thing that people have had problems with. They're really hard to get to shed good because the humidity issues. They don't like constant humidity because it's bad for them because they'll get the RIs and everything. They like it to be wet. They don't like it to be wet all the time. So what I do is when they start going blue, I'll just bump up the humidity a little bit, keep it warm or more humid throughout the day. Then right when they start to go out of blue, right when they're just sort of getting kind of just normal looking again, but still obviously in shed, I'll remove the substrate and just dump a bowl of water in there, make it nice and wet all throughout. 4 days or so, they'll shed out. It'll be a really perfect shed. You just want to take it all out of there, clean out the cage a little bit, and replace the substrate.
All right, cool. Awesome.
Any more questions? All right, looks like a resounding no.
Sounds like you did pretty good.
Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you all for coming. I mean, I like the way this meeting is going. But yeah, definitely try to keep coming out here every single time. Just keep this thing going. Make it bigger and bigger. Eventually, maybe expand to something else. I don't know.
Excellent.
But we'll see. All right, thanks everybody.